The Book of Heaven. Volume 5. Calling creatures to return to place, rank, and purpose, for which they were created by God. Luisa Picaretta. The little girl of the divine will. Lord, come to my aid. Tame my rebellious will, always so recalcitrant in the face of holy obedience. Fill me with your holy and adorable will until I overflow, that my will may be consumed by yours. I will then have the happiness of no longer fighting against holy obedience. And you, holy obedience, forgive me if I always make war on you. Grant me the strength to follow you peacefully in everything, even if sometimes you do not seem very reasonable to me. How can I fight against you in this story of the writings I must do in obedience to my confessor? But, enough, let's be quiet, don't wait any longer and start writing. My previous confessor, 1, is very busy, much more so than in the years when he led me. As he cannot come, my current confessor, 2, comes in his place. I never thought it would happen, especially since I was so happy with the other, he had my full confidence. About a year and a half before my current confessor started with me, and while I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus had told me to make sure that my future confessor cared about my inner life and cooperated fully with him about my condition. He told me, when I entrust a victim soul to a confessor, his work in that person's inner life must be continuous. You will tell your future confessor that he will really have to cooperate with me. Otherwise, I will put you in someone else's hands. Lord, listen, I replied, who else will be patient enough to accept the cross to come every day and sacrifice themselves as my present confessor does? I will summon him, I will grant him the light and he will come. It is unlikely that he will accept this cross. Yes, it will come. If he does not listen to me, then I will send him my mother. Since he loves her, he will not deny her this favor. 1 Don Michel de Benedictus. 2 Don Gennaro de Gennaro, who became his confessor in 1889. Whoever really loves him does not take long. However, I will keep an eye on what he will do. Tell him everything I told you. Some time after his coming, I told him everything, but the poor man, because of a new task, was unable to take the direction of my inner life. I could see that it was more because of his incapacity than by a deliberate choice. When I passed on to him what Jesus had told me, he applied himself better, but he quickly returned to his old habits. Blessed Jesus complained about it and I talked about it again with him. One day he himself sent me a new confessor to whom I opened my soul, telling him everything. He agreed to come and I was surprised that he said yes. But the wonder soon ceased. I don't know how to explain it, but he only came for 2 or 3 days, and then he left. He disappeared like a shadow and I continued with my current confessor. This morning I saw my confessor very humiliated. With him were Blessed Jesus and Saint Joseph. They said to him, "Go to work, the Lord is ready to give you the grace you ask for." Then, seeing my dear Jesus suffering as during his passion, I said to him, "Lord, are you not tired of enduring so much suffering?" Jesus answered me, "No, one suffering only inflames my heart to accept another. This is the way of divine suffering. Suffer and act by looking at nothing but the resulting fruits. In my wounds and in my blood, I see saved nations and creatures receiving graces. Rather than feeling tired, my heart feels joy and a burning desire to suffer more. It must be so for every soul. His sufferings must be a part of my own sufferings. The soul must not look at what it does, but at the glory given to God and the fruits that result from his sufferings and deeds." I was out of my body and I saw that my confessor was experiencing great difficulty with the grace he desired. Once again, blessed and holy Jesus. Joseph said to him, "If you go to work, all your difficulties will disappear, they will fall like the scales of a fish." I was in my usual state. After being in great difficulty for some time, I saw my adorable Jesus in my arms. A light radiated from his forehead, and in this light the following words were written. "Love is everything, and for God and for man, if love ceases, life itself ceases." There are, however, Two kinds of love, one is spiritual and divine, the other corporeal and disordered. Between these two loves, there is a big difference. You could say that this difference is as big as the difference between thinking about something in your mind and doing something with your hands. The mind can, in an instant, think of 100 things, but the hands can accomplish only one thing at a time. The divine Creator made creatures out of love alone. If God keeps His attributes continually directed towards creatures, it is love that urges Him to do so. Its attributes result from love. Disordered love, such as that of riches and pleasures, does not sustain man's life. These things not only do not lead to sanctification, but man can end up making them gods. If love is holy, it leads to sanctification. If love is perverse, it leads to damnation. This morning, after very bitter days, blessed Jesus came and communicated with me in a particularly familiar way. So much so that I thought I owned it forever. But, at lightning speed, He disappeared. My grief was so great that I felt like I was going crazy, especially because I was sure that I would never lose it again. As I collapsed in pain, He returned at lightning speed and, in a resonant and serious voice, said to me, "Who are you to pretend to always keep me with you?" Crazy as I was, I answered boldly, "I am everything when I am with you. I feel like a will coming out of the bosom of its Creator. With this will, as long as it remains united to you, I experience existence, life, peace, and all goods. Without you, on the contrary, I feel broken, lost, restless, lifeless, with only bad things. To have life and not to be lost, my will, out of you, must always look for your breast and must remain there forever." Jesus seemed to understand everything. But, once again, He asked me, "But who are you?" I resumed, "Lord, I am nothing more than a drop of water. And as long as this drop of water remains in the sea, it feels as if it were the whole sea. It remains clean and clear like other waters. But if it leaves the sea, it becomes muddy. Because of her smallness, she is lost." Moved, He leaned over to me, hugged me, and said, "My daughter, the one who always wants to remain in my will participates in the divine life. Even though he may momentarily leave my will, since I created him with a free will, my power is doing a miracle by allowing him to continue to participate in the divine life. Because of this continual participation, he experiences such a strong union with the divine will that, even if he wanted to, he could not leave it. This is the continual miracle that I grant to the one who always does my will. Après avoir vécu plusieurs jours aimers à cause de l'absence continuelle de monde adorable Jesus, Jai senti ce matin que j'avais dans les profondeurs de l'affliction. Fatigué et sans force, Jai pense que Jesus me volait plus dans cet état, et Jai presque décide de tout abandonner. Pendant que Jai pensais ainsi, monde aimable Jesus remua en moi et me laissa savoir tu il priat pour moi. Jai compris tu il implorate. La puissance de son père. Sa force d'âme et sa providence pour moi. Then he said, "Don't you see, O Father? As she is in great need of help and how, after so many graces, she wants to become a sinner and leave your will." I cannot express how my heart broke when I heard these words of Jesus. He came out of me, and after making sure it was my blessed Jesus, I said to him, "Lord, is it your will that I dwell in this state as a victim soul? Since I no longer feel as before, it no longer seems necessary for the confessor to come. So, at least, I will spare him this sacrifice." Jesus continued, "For the time being, it is not my will that you leave this state. As for the sacrifice of the confessor, I will pay him 100-fold for his charity." Then, deeply distressed, he added, "My daughter, the socialists managed to strike within the church. In France, they did so publicly. In Italy, in a more hidden way. My justice is looking for an opportunity to send punishments. I was out of my body and saw Jesus holding a rod with which he was hitting the people. After being beaten, people dispersed and rebelled. Jesus said to them, I have struck you in order to reunite with me. But, rather than coming together, you rebel and you are fleeing from me. It is therefore necessary to sound the trumpet. While he was saying this, he began to sound the trumpet. I then understood that the Lord would send chastisements and that men, rather than humiliating oneself, were going to offend him more and run away from him. Subsequently, the Lord would sound the trumpet for other serious punishments. I went through several days of deprivation and tears. It seemed to me that the Lord had suspended me from being a victim. No matter what I tried, I couldn't let go of my senses. Rather, I was gripped by a multitude of abdominal pains that made me anxious and that I could not understand. That night, during a dream, I saw an angel guiding me inside a garden. All the plants were blackened. But I wasn't paying attention because I was only thinking about the fact that Jesus had abandoned me. Then my confessor came. Finding me awake, he told me that the vines had frozen. I was very distressed thinking of the poor people and I was afraid that Jesus would refrain from bringing me back to my usual state so that I could punish freely. This morning, however, blessed Jesus came and brought me back to my usual state. As soon as I saw him, I told him, Lord, what did you do yesterday? You didn't tell me anything about that. I would have begged you to suspend this punishment, at least in part. Jesus answered, My daughter, it was necessary for me to keep you away. Otherwise, you would have arrested me and I would not have been free. And then, how many times have I not done what you had opposed? Ah, ma fille. Il est nécessaire que les punitions viennent sur le monde. Autrement, si me préoccupe de ménager leur corps, ils perdront leur âme. Ayant dit cela, il disparut. Je me suis alors retrouvé hors de mon corps, seul et sans le du Jesus. Je suis dans le explorer. J'ai vu dans le ciel un soleil, mais un soleil différent du notre. Pres du soleil s'éteint et une multitude de saints observant l'état du monde. Sa corruption, et. Comment il se moque de Dieu, ils crient tout d'un seul voix. Venge ton honneur et ta gloire. Sirs toi de ta justice. Carl home ne vote pas reconnaître les droits de son créateur. Même sils parlant en latin, je comprends la signification de ce qu'ils décient. En les entendant, je tremblais et jai senti monde sang se guérir. Jai supply Jesus de faire miséricorde. Je continuais dans monde état pénible de privation. Au plus, Jesus apparaissait sans me parler et pour un bref instant. Ce matin, alors que j'étais inconscient, monde confesseur obligeait Jesus à venir et, cela, presque sans nécessite. Jesus eut à se monter. Se tournant vers le confesseur avec une expression sérieuse et tourmentée, il dit. Que veux-tu? Le prêtre sembla confesse et ne savait que dire. Alors jai dit. Seigneur, peut-être que c'est pour la grâce tu il veut obtenir. Jesus lui dit. Dispose-toi et tu la recevras. Tu es avec toi l'âme victime, plus tu resteras pres d'elle en pensée et en intention, plus tu te sentiras fort et libre de faire ce que tu veux. Jai demanda à Jesus, Seigneur pourquoi ne vins tu pas? Il répondit, tu veux savoir pourquoi? Écoute. Jai alors entendu une multitude de voix venant de toutes les parties du monde et criant. Mort au papa. Détruisez la religion. Abattez les églises. Slaughter all authority. No one should be above us. And I've heard a lot of other satanic things like that. Our Lord added. My daughter, when a man is prepared to receive grace, he receives grace. When he disposes to evil, it is the evil he receives. All these voices you hear reach my throne, and this frequently. Also, when my justice sees that man wants not only evil, but asks for it insistently, then evil is what my justice is forced to grant. I do this in order to make them understand what this evil they desire is. You really know what evil is when you find yourself in it. That is why my justice seeks to punish man. I was in my usual state. As soon as I saw my adorable Jesus, he said to me, "Peace puts all passions in order." But what triumphs over everything, establishes the complete good in the soul, and sanctifies everything. It is purity of intention. That is, to accomplish everything with the sole intention of pleasing God. Purity of intent rules and corrects the virtues themselves, including obedience. She is like a maestro who directs the spiritual music of the soul. Having said that, he disappeared at lightning speed. I had left my body. Blessed Jesus was in my arms, and we were in the middle of many people. With rods, swords, and knives, people sought to hurt the body of Jesus. However, despite their best efforts, they could not do him any injury. Although well developed, their weapons had lost their power to hurt. Jesus and I were very sorry to see the brutality of these hearts. Even if their efforts led to nothing, they still repeated the blows with the hope of success. If they didn't hurt Jesus, it was simply because they couldn't. They became very angry that their weapons were ineffective and that they could not satisfy their desire to hurt Jesus. They said to themselves, "Why can't we do that? In other circumstances, we could reach him, but this time, while he is in the arms of this woman, we can do nothing to him. Let's see if we can hurt this woman and separate them from each other." While they were saying this, Jesus left my arms and gave them the freedom to do as they wished. Before they could put their hands on me, I said, "Lord, I offer my life for the Church and for the triumph of truth. I beg you to accept my sacrifice." Jesus accepted my sacrifice, and they, with the help of a sword, undertook to cut my neck. But, while they were doing that, I came back into my body. I thought I had reached the point of my desires, that of dying. But, to my disappointment, everything stopped. After spending the last days in Jesus' deprivation and suffering, I found myself out of my body this morning with baby Jesus in my arms. As soon as I saw him, I said, "Ah, dear Jesus, since you left me alone, at least teach me how I should act in this state. Neglect and suffering." He replied, "My daughter, everything you suffer in your arms, legs and heart, unite him to my own sufferings. In the wounds of my arms, legs and heart reciting 5 glory to the Father. And offer yourself to divine justice in reparation. Bad deeds end. The evil desires of creatures. Uniting you with what I have suffered by my crown of thorns. Do this by reciting 3 glory to the Father. In reparation for the sins committed by man through his 3 faculties. Who have become so disfigured that my image in him cannot be recognized. Always looking to keep your will united with mine and to love me at every moment. May your memory be like a bell that continually rings in you, reminding you all that I have done and suffered for you and the many graces I have granted you. Thank me and be grateful. Gratitude is the key that opens divine treasures. Let your intellect think of nothing else. Only take care of God. If you do so, I will find my image in you and I will receive the satisfaction that I cannot receive from other creatures. This you have to do continuously, because if the offense is continuous, satisfaction must be too. I said, "Ah, Lord, how bad I was. I was even selfish." He continued, "My daughter, do not be afraid. When a soul does everything for me, I accept what it does. I even accept the comfort and consolations she receives as if they were given to my own suffering body. Also, to free yourself from any doubt. Whenever you feel comforted and that you feel the need to accept this, do it for me and say, Lord, I want to comfort your suffering body. At the same time that my own body is comforted. As I was saying this, he withdrew from me slowly, until I didn't see him anymore and I couldn't talk to him anymore. His departure caused me such great pain that I felt like I was torn to pieces. To find him, I entered the closed room where he had locked himself. There I said to him, Ah! Lord! Why did you leave me? Aren't you my life? My soul and also my body are too weak to bear the suffering of being deprived of you. I feel like I'm dying. This death is my only consolation. While I was saying this, Jesus blessed me and, once again, he disappeared. Then I went back to normal. I was in my usual state when, I'm not sure how, I saw my adorable Jesus in me. Seeing me astonished, he said to me, My daughter, those who use their senses to offend me distort my image in them. Sin kills the soul, it becomes dead to all that is divine. If, on the contrary, the person uses his senses to glorify me, I can tell him, You are my eyes, my ears, my mouth, my hands, and my feet. It is thus associated with my creative action. If, in addition to giving me glory with her senses, she knows how to offer for others, sufferings, satisfaction and repair. It also associates itself with my redemptive action. And if she surrenders even more to my action in her, she associates herself with my sanctifying action. Thus, all that I have accomplished in creation, redemption, and sanctification, I infuse a participation in the soul. Everything is there if the soul corresponds to my action in it. While I was in my usual state, I left my body and saw the child Jesus. He held in his hands a cup full of suffering and a stick. He said to me, Do you see, my daughter, the world makes me drink continuously at this cup of suffering. I replied, Lord, give me some of this suffering so that you are not alone in suffering. He gave me a drop of this bitter drink. Puis, with the stick he was holding, he touched my heart, piercing a hole in it. From this hole flowed a small trickle of this bitter drink that I had consumed. But this drink had turned into a sweet milk that flowed into baby Jesus' mouth, relieving and refreshing him. He said to me, My daughter, if, when I give bitterness and tribulation to a soul, it unites with my will, I like it. If it thank me for his suffering, offers them to me as a present. And this even if, for her, these sufferings and bitterness remain, then they are changed for me gently and refreshingly. If, by working and suffering, a soul seeks only to please me, without seeking any compensation, it pleases me and refreshes me even more. What makes the soul the most dear to my heart, the most beautiful in my eyes and the most intimate with the divine being? It is perseverance in this way of doing things. It then becomes immutable of the very immutability of God. If, on the contrary, the soul says yes at one time and no at another, if she is looking for a particular goal this time and another goal the next time, if today it seeks to please God and, tomorrow, to please creatures, then the soul resembles to a queen one day and to a vile servant the next day, to someone who dines one day with exquisite food and the next day with scrap. Then he disappeared. Soon after, he returned, adding, The sun exists for the benefit of all, but not all benefit from its effects. Similarly, the divine sun gives its light to everyone, but who enjoys its beneficial effects? Who keeps his eyes open to the light of truth? The greatest number remain in darkness. Only those who have the firm intention of pleasing me rejoice in the fullness of this Sunday. Being out of my body and having seen the heavenly Queen, I prostrated myself at her feet and said to her, My sweet mother, in what terrible state I find myself, deprived of my only treasure, of my very life. I don't know which saints to dedicate myself to. And I was crying. The Blessed Virgin opened her heart as one opens a chest. She took baby Jesus there and gave it to me saying, My daughter, do not cry, this is your treasure, your life, and your all. Take it, keep it with you forever and keep your eyes fixed on him and you. Don't be embarrassed if he doesn't tell you anything or if you have nothing to say to him. Keep only your eyes fixed on him and you and thou shalt hear everything, do everything, and satisfy for all. This is the beauty of the inner life of a soul. She has neither to speak nor needs education, nothing external attracts or disturbs her. Everything that attracts her and all her possessions are inside of her. By simply looking at Jesus in her, she understands everything and does everything. By doing so, you will ascend to the top of Calvary where you will see Jesus, not as a child, but as the crucified. And you'll stay there with him. With baby Jesus in my arms and in the company of the Blessed Virgin, it seemed that we were walking on the path of Calvary. Meanwhile, someone tried to take Jesus away from me. I shouted out to the Heavenly Queen for help, saying, "My mother, help me, because they want to take Jesus away from me." She replied, "Don't be afraid. Your task is to keep your inner eyes fixed on him. It has such power that all other powers, whether human or evil, will be defeated." As we continued our walk, we arrived at a church where Holy Mass was celebrated. At the time of communion, I approached the altar with baby Jesus in my arms. Great was my surprise when, immediately after I had received the host, Jesus disappeared from my arms. Soon after, I returned to my body. This morning, I was very upset by the absence of my adorable Jesus. Suddenly, he appeared inside me in such a way that his presence filled my whole person. As I watched him, he said to me, as if to explain to me the meaning of this apparition, "My daughter, why do you feel embarrassed because I am your master in such a total way? When a soul manages to make me the master of his mind, his arms, his heart, and his feet, in short, of his whole being, sin can no longer reign over him. Even if something involuntary enters into her, she is immediately disposed to purification and immediately rejects the involuntary action, since I am the master of this soul and it remains under my control. Moreover, since I am holy, the soul finds it difficult to retain in it something that is not holy. Moreover, since the soul has given me everything during his life, it is right that I give him everything at his death by admitting him without delay to the beatific vision. Anyone who gives himself completely to me during his life will not be touched by the flames of purgatory." I was in my usual state. My adorable Jesus came and made me hear his sweet voice, telling me, the more a soul strips itself of natural things, the more it acquires supernatural and divine things. Plus lse dépôt de son amour propre, plus elle acquired l'amour de Dieu. Moins ls ambition à la connaissance des sciences humaines et à rechercher les plaisirs de la terre, plus elle acquired la connaissance des choses célestes et des vertus. J'étais profondément affligé et presque folle à cause de l'absence de mon adorable Jesus. Je ne savais pas où j'étais, sur la terre ou en enfer. Soudain, Jesus m'apparut et me dit, "Quiconque marche sur le chemin des vertus vit de ma propre vie. Quiconque marche sur le chemin du vice vit en contradiction avec moi. Il disparut pousse revint rapidement et ajuda. Par Monday incarnation, Monday humanite se greffa sur ma divinite." Anyone looking for to remain united to me by his will, his deeds and his heart, to live his life imitating mine, grows in my own life and develops the graft I have made of my humanity on my divinity, adding a branch to the tree of my humanity. If, on the other hand, the soul does not unite with me, it does not develop its branch on my humanity. Whoever chooses not to be with me cannot have life, he is lost and goes to ruin. Once again he disappeared. Then I left my body and found myself inside a rose garden. Some roses were very beautiful and well formed. Their petals were half open. Other roses lost their petals at the slightest breeze until only their stem remained. A young man, I don't know who he was, said to me, "The first roses represent souls living in interiority. These souls show a beauty, freshness, and constancy that prevent their petals, virtues, from falling to the ground. The fact that their petals are half closed symbolizes the opening they make to the outside world. Having life in them, they are perfumed with holy charity. Like lights, they shine before God and men. The pink seconds represent frivolous souls, the little good they do is done for all to see. Their wide open petals symbolize that they do not have God and His love as their only goal. Their petals, their virtues, are attached weakly. As soon as a breeze of pride, pleasure, self-love or human respect begins to blow, they fall, only the thorns that sting their conscience remain. Then I reintegrated my body. I meditated on the hour of the Passion, where Jesus left His mother to go to death. More precisely at the moment when Jesus and Mary blessed each other. I made reparation for those who do not bless the Lord in all things, and who, even, offend Him. I also prayed that God would multiply the blessings which are necessary for us to keep us in grace. And I tried to make up for what is missing in the glory of God, because of the negligence of the creatures, to bless God in all things. While I was doing this, I felt Jesus stirring in me and telling me, "My daughter, when you reflect on the blessing I have bestowed on my mother, also think about the fact that I have blessed every creature. Everything has been blessed. Their thoughts, their words, their heartbeat, their steps and their actions made for me. Absolutely everything was marked by my blessing. All the good that the creature can do has already been accomplished by my humanity. Thus, everything has been deified by me." He continued. "My life really goes on earth. Not only in the most blessed sacrament, but also in the souls who live in my grace. Creatures cannot embrace everything I have done. Their capabilities are limited. Thus, in such a soul I continue my reparation. In this other my praise. In such other my thanksgiving. In such another my zeal for the holiness of souls. In this other my sufferings, and so on. According to the quality with which souls are united to me, I develop my life in them. Imagine what sorrow the creatures cause me who, while I want to act in them, do not pay attention to me." Afterward, it disappeared and I reintegrated my body. I was in my usual state. As soon as I saw Jesus, He said to me, "Whether the angels succeed or not in their guard of souls, they perform their duties and they never abandon this task entrusted to them by God. Even though, despite their care, their eagerness and their attendance, they see souls getting lost, they are always at their post. It is not true that, according to their successes or failures, they give more glory or less glory to God, because their will is always stretched towards the accomplishment of the work entrusted to them. The soul victims are human angels who must make reparation for humanity, begging on His behalf and protect it. Whether or not they are successful in their mission, they must not stop their work. At least not before it is indicated to them from above. This morning I saw inside me my adorable Jesus crowned with thorns. Seeing Him like this, I said to Him, 'My sweet Lord, why your head? Did she envy your scourged body which had suffered so much and shed so much blood, and did she not want to be less honored than Him by suffering, to the point of having instigated your enemies to crown you with such a painful crown of thorns?' Jesus answered, 'My daughter, the crowning of thorns has several meanings. Even though much has been said about it, there is still much to be said. As if competing with my body, my head wanted to have its own suffering and flow of blood. This,' he notes, 'is something almost incomprehensible to a created mind. The head unites body and soul in such a way that the body without the head is nothing. Even if it is possible to live without other members, it is impossible to live without one's head, since it is the essential part of the whole man. Whether the body sins or does good, it is the head that directs everything. The rest of the body is nothing but an instrument. My head had to restore my kingdom and my lordship. Obtain the merits so that the new heavens of graces and the new worlds of truth can penetrate the human mind. To counter the hells of sins and vile passions, I wanted to crown the whole human family of glory, of honor and of dignity. So I wanted in the first place to crown my humanity, even with a painful crown of thorns, symbol of the crown of immortality, which I gave back to the creatures who had lost her through sin. In addition, crowning with thorns means that there is no glory or honor without thorns. Passions can never be controlled, nor the acquired virtues, without the mortification of the flesh and the spirit. True power is acquired with the gift of oneself, with the wounds of mortification and sacrifice. Finally, the crown of thorns means that I am the only true king and that the person who makes me the only king of his heart will have joy and peace. I will make her the queen of my kingdom. Those streams of blood that flowed from my head have flooded the human mind with the knowledge of my kingship upon them. How could I express how I felt as a result of Jesus' words? I miss the words. Really, the little I said seems incoherent to me. I think it must be so when we talk about the things of God. Since God is uncreated and we are His creatures, we cannot talk about Him without tinkering. While I was in my usual state, I felt full of sin and bitterness. My adorable Jesus appeared in me like a lightning bolt. As soon as I saw Him, my sins disappeared. Trembling, I said to Him, "Lord, how is it that in your presence, when I should be more aware of my sins, the opposite happens?" He replied, "My daughter, my presence is a sea without limits. Whoever comes into my presence is like a drop of water coming into the sea. How can I tell if it is muddy or clear when it has been diluted in my sea? My divine touch purifies everything, makes white what is black. Why, then, are you scared? Moreover, my will is light. Since you always do my will, you live in this light. It transforms your mortifications, your privations and your sufferings in nourishment of light for your soul. The only substantial nourishment that gives true life is my will. Don't you know that this continual diet of light makes the defects that the soul acquires disappear?" Having said that, he disappeared. I continued in my usual state, seeing my adorable Jesus only in brief moments. He said to me, "My daughter, do you know what sin is? It is an act of human will, done in opposition to the divine will. Imagine two friends in discord. If their discord is minor, it can be said that their friendship is not as perfect as it should be. How can they love and contradict each other at the same time? True love demands to live in the will of the other, even at the cost of sacrifices. If the discord is serious, they are no longer friends but enemies. Such is sin. Opposing the divine will, even in the smallest things. It is like becoming an enemy of God. It is always the creature that is the cause of such conflicts. I had talked to my confessor about my fears about whether or not my victim status corresponded to God's will and if, to check this, I should not try to leave this state, to see if I could succeed. My confessor, without his usual difficulties, said to me, "All right, tomorrow you'll try." I felt like I was freed from a burden. The priest celebrated Holy Mass. Having received communion, I saw my adorable Jesus in me. With his hands clasped together, he stared at me and begged for mercy and help. At that moment, I left my body. I found myself in a room where there was a noble and venerable woman, severely crippled and lying in a bed. The head of her bed was so high that she touched the ceiling. I was forced to stay at the top of this headboard, supported by a priest, to keep the bed stable and watch over the sick woman. While I was in this position, I saw some religious surrounding the bed and preparing treatments for the patient. With great bitterness, they said to each other, She's very sick, so sick. All it would take is a little jolt from the bed. I focused on holding the head of the bed tightly, for fear that a movement of the bed could cause the death of the lady. Seeing that the ordeal was protracted, and annoyed by my inactivity, I said to the one who was holding me, "Out of pity, let me come down, I'm not doing anything right there and I'm not helping him. What's the point of me staying like this? Downstairs, I could at least serve her and help her." The priest replied, "Haven't you heard that the slightest movement of the bed can severely worsen his condition? If I let you go down, there will be no one to stabilize the bed and she will die." I said, "Is it possible that by doing only that I can prevent his death? By heaven, put me on the ground." After I repeated these words several times, he put me on the floor without anyone holding me anymore. I approached the patient and, to my great surprise and regret, I saw that the bed was moving. His face became livid. She trembled and made the roars of death heard. The few religious present began to cry, saying, "It's too late, she's in her last breaths." Then enemies, soldiers and officers entered the room to beat the sick woman. Although so seriously ill, she rose and, with great fearlessness and dignity, offered herself to be beaten and wounded. Seeing this, I began to tremble like a leaf and said to myself, "I am the cause of all this, because of me, this evil happens." I understood that this woman symbolized the church, crippled in its members and in many other things, which I do not need to mention, since the meaning is clear from what I have written. Then, inside me, Jesus said, "If I suspend you permanently, my enemies will begin to shed the blood of my church." I replied, "Lord, it's not that I don't want to stay in this state. May heaven not allow me to withdraw from your will, even for a moment. If you want me to stay, I will stay, otherwise, I will leave." Jesus continues, "My daughter, if your confessor clears you by saying, 'All right, tomorrow you'll try,' your role as a victim will cease. It is only through obedience that one becomes a soul victim. If necessary, I will perform a miracle of my almightiness to enlighten the one who leads you." I suffered willingly, but it was obedience to my dear Father that made me a victim. He wanted all my actions to be marked with the seal of obedience. Returning to my body, I was afraid to leave my victim state, but I was quick to say, "Me leads by obedience must think about it. If the Lord wants me, I am ready." I was in my usual state. I thought that if the Lord didn't come, I would have to try and force myself to see if, at least, I could succeed. My adorable Jesus came. He let me see that as long as I want to remain in the state of victim, He draws me to Him in such a way that I cannot move away. And if I want to leave this state, He withdraws and He leaves me free to do so. As for me, I was not sure what I should do and I said to myself, how I would like to see my confessor and ask him what I should do. A little later, I saw our Lord with my confessor. I said to him, "Tell me whether I should stay, yes or no." As I said, I understand that my confessor had withdrawn the order he had given me the day before. Immediately, I decided to stay, thinking that if it was true that he had withdrawn his order, that was fine. And if I had only imagined that he had withdrawn, my conclusion was wrong. So when my confessor came and told me to try this another day, I calmed down. Appearing to me again a little later, blessed Jesus said to me, "My daughter, the beauty of a soul in a state of grace is so great that God Himself is captivated by it. Angels and saints are stunned at the sight of this great wonder. They run to this soul who still lives in the world but possesses grace. Attracted by its heavenly fragrance and for their greatest pleasure, they find in this soul the same Jesus who beatified them in paradise. So much so that they like it just as much to stay with this soul as to live in heaven. What maintains this miracle granted continually to the soul? With new shades of beauty, this is life in my will. What is? Removes from the soul the stains of imperfection and gives him knowledge of the object he possesses? My will. What strengthens and stabilizes the soul, keeping it confirmed in grace? My will. Living in my will is the pinnacle of holiness. It leads to a continual evolution in grace. However, he who makes my will today and his will tomorrow cannot be confirmed in grace, he progresses and he retreats. It causes a lot of harm to his soul. This deprives God and his soul of much glory. It's like someone who one day is rich and another day is poor. It is not confirmed either in wealth or in poverty. No one can say how it will end. Then he disappeared. A little later my confessor came. I told him what I had written and he assured me that he had really withdrawn the order he had given me. In obedience to my confessor, I will now continue to talk about the things I understood on October 24th. The woman symbolized the church. It is crippled not by itself but in its limbs. Even if it is prostrate, abused by its enemies and crippled in its limbs, it never loses its dignity and venerable condition. I understood that. The fact that the woman was lying in bed meant that, even if she is oppressed, crippled, and attacked by her enemies, the church rests from a perpetual rest. In peace and security in the paternal womb of God. Like a baby in the mother's breast. I also understood that the head of the bed that reached the ceiling symbolized the divine protection that always sustains the church. Everything in the church comes to her from heaven. The sacraments, the doctrine and everything else. Everything is heavenly, holy, and pure. There is continual communication between heaven and the church. As for the few religious who assisted the woman, I understood that they represented these few people who, at the risk of their lives, defend the church, suffering the evils she receives as if they were their own. The room where the lady lived, made of stones, represented the strength of the church and his endurance not to give up any of his rights. The dying woman boldly accepting to be beaten by her enemies illustrates the fact that the church, even if she seems dying, behaves with great fearlessness. Her suffering and shed blood reflect her true spirit. She is always ready for mortification, like Jesus Christ. I was in my usual state and saw my adorable Jesus for a while. He told me, "My daughter, it is good and commendable to accept mortifications and sufferings as penance and as punishment. But this is not God's way of acting. I did a lot and suffered a lot. But my only motive was the love of my Father and that of men." It is easy to see if a creature acts and suffers in the divine way. Only love is behind his actions and sufferings. If there are other motives, even good ones, it is because it acts at the level of creatures. The merit she receives then is only that a creature can acquire and not divine merit. If she adopts my way of acting, the fire of love destroy in it all disparities and inequalities and will melt in a single work, that of the creature and mine. This morning, my adorable Jesus appeared to me inside as incarnate. Looking at me, he said, "My daughter, when I see that a soul is adjusted to the goals of my creation, I am satisfied because I see in her that my work has achieved its goal. I feel obligated to her. Living in my will is the pinnacle of holiness and leads to continual evolution in grace. However, he who makes my will today and his will tomorrow cannot be confirmed in grace, he progresses and he retreats. This causes a lot of harm to his soul. This deprives God and his soul of much glory. It's like someone who one day is rich and another day is poor. It is not confirmed either in wealth or in poverty. No one can say how it will end." Then he disappeared. A little later my confessor came. I told him what I had written and he assured me that he had really withdrawn the order he had given me. In obedience to my confessor, I will now continue to talk about the things I understood on October 24th. The woman symbolized the church. It is crippled not by itself but in its limbs. Even if it is prostrate, abused by its enemies and crippled in its limbs, it never loses its dignity and venerable condition. I understood that the fact that the woman was lying in a bed meant that, even if it is oppressed, crippled, and attacked by its enemies, the church rests with perpetual rest in peace and security in the paternal womb of God, like a baby in her mother's womb. I also understood that the head of the bed that reached the ceiling symbolized divine protection that always supports the church. Everything in the church comes to her from heaven. The sacraments, doctrine, and everything else. Everything is heavenly, holy, and pure. There is continual communication between heaven and the church. He added. My obligation to her is that of a more intense love, allowing her to have a taste of the happiness of heaven. In other words, I nourish his intelligence with the knowledge of eternal truths. I refreshed his gaze with my beauty. I caress his ears by the softness of my voice. I cover his mouth with my kisses and I embrace his heart with all my affection. All this corresponds to the purpose for which I created it. Know me. Love me and serve me. He disappeared, and then, leaving my body, I saw my confessor. I told him what Jesus had told me. I asked him if I was on the path of truth. He replied, yes, you know well how to talk about God. For when God speaks and the soul listens, not only does she perceive the veracity of the words heard, but she is so moved internally that only the Spirit of God can be the author of these words. This morning, my adorable Jesus did not come, and I began to say to myself, who can tell if it is our Lord who is coming, or rather the enemy who wants to deceive me? How can Jesus Christ so cruelly forsake me? While I was thinking like this, he manifested himself to me for a few moments. Raising his right hand and pressing his thumb over my mouth, he said to me, calm down, calm down. Would it be fair for someone who has seen the sun to say that it was not the sun, just because at this particular moment he does not see it? Would it be more just and reasonable for him to simply say that the sun is hidden? Then he disappeared. But even if I didn't see him, I could feel his hands touch me. Touch again and again my mouth, my mind, and my heart. He made me become luminous. But, as I couldn't see it, I began to have doubts. He appeared to me again and added, you're not satisfied yet? You risk ruining my work in you. Because by doubting you lack peace. I am the source of peace. Whoever, realizing that you lack peace, will doubt that it is I, the King of Peace, who guides you and dwells in you. Ah! Don't you want to be reasonable? It is true that I do everything in the soul, and without me, it does not achieve anything. It is also true that I always leave a vein of free will in the soul. Being troubled, you interrupt your union with me. I then have to fold my arms, because I am prevented from doing anything in you. I must wait until you are at peace again and your will to be in union with mine.